Hello. Can everyone hear me? Hello, my name is Karen Britton. We've still got people coming in through the waiting room at the moment. So we'll get started in just a second. I just thought if you wanted to take a moment to have a quick look and read our little notes on the screen that you'll see as well. So it's an interactive kind of Zoom meeting that we're going to be doing today. And so this is your chance to kind of put forward some questions to us, have a listen to Christy Rodwell and my chat, use the hand signals and emojis when you need to. And there is an option up in your Zoom view to actually have the screen slideshow and our faces on the same screen. So please go ahead and do that as you're going through as well. So I just thought I would kick off. Thank you very much for joining our first crack at a grants Q&A information webinar. I wanted to acknowledge the First Nations people right around the country. We do have a beautiful national giving circle here that gives away to beautiful First Nations charities and communities. So acknowledging all of the traditional custodians around the country. I am here in Perth on Whadjuk Noongar land, but I'm also acknowledging that there are people from the Turrbal and Yugera peoples in Queensland and the Gadigal people in New South Wales and all around Australia as well. So welcome and thank you. And I also wanted to acknowledge that 100 Women, you know, we have a definition of women, and that is including all those that identify as women as well. So I would like to thank Christy Rodwell, our grants chair, and Lorna Boys, our grants manager, for joining us on the call today. They're going to be chatting with us, and they are actually volunteers, so they're taking their time out of their current jobs to join the call today. So I just wanted to acknowledge and thank them for joining me on the call today. So I haven't introduced myself properly. I am Karen Britton, the Executive Officer for 100 Women, and I'm delighted to be talking with you today as well. Thank you to our members that are also on board on the call that are interested to find out about how our grants process works and where your donations are flowing through to. So it's a really interesting process, and I hope that you enjoy the session as well. And also acknowledging our amazing grant applicants that are on the call. You and we all have an investment in supporting women and girls. So just acknowledging that this is a really beautiful space to be working in. We get so much intrinsic rewards from working with such beautiful charities that are really driving us to continue doing the work that we are at 100 Women. So thank you for coming onto this call today to find out how you can put forward your amazing projects and hopefully get through to that finalist group and get some funding from our members. Let's preface this meeting. As I said, this is the first time that we are giving this a crack, so bear with us if there's a little bit of ebbs and flows throughout the session. You'll see that we have a meeting chat box. If you're familiar with Zoom, which we all are from COVID days, you'll be familiar with the meeting chat box. And we've got the lovely Lorna Boys, our grants manager. She's on board to answer any questions that you have throughout the session. But I think maybe just take note that we are going through a lot of content today. So you might find that your questions answered while we're going through the interview. And then we also have, what else we got coming up here? So we've got our schedule up online. So I'll talk to you about 100 Women just in a second, and then we will kick off with Christy Rodwell's interview, and then we're going to open up with questions probably about 2:10. And any questions that we can't answer can be flowed through to our grants at 100 Women inbox, and we're happy to respond to you. But let me just tell you a little about 100 Women first, because some of you may be joining our call and not aware of the type of organisation that we are. So 100 Women is a national philanthropic giving circle and an independent charity, just like you. So our origin story came from a group of women wanting to take more tangible action to address the atrocities facing women and girls globally, and the lack of female philanthropists that were facilitating that change. So the concept was that if we could bring 100 women together to give $100 a month, then we would be raising $120,000 a year to give away to projects that are changing the lives of women and girls for the better. And so in the first year, we did just that. And 12 years on, we have grown exponentially. We now have 360 odd members who have collectively donated almost 1.5 million now. We've cracked over the 1.5. And these grants have positively and directly benefited 37,000 women and girls. That's locally, nationally, and globally. So we are really delighted to be doing this kind of work in a much needed space. And over the years, we've changed a few things, such as reducing the entry point to becoming a member, which is now less than $1 a day. And that's an inclusive kind of purpose that we're doing. And also we have a more diverse membership. So all gender identities are welcome to become a member of 100 Women. So my background is that I used to work for a women's refuge here in Perth called Zonta House Refuge Association. And back in 2014, I wrote the grant for 100 Women's inaugural grant round. And we were lucky to receive $40,000 from the membership. And the project that we applied for still runs today. So as does 90% of the projects that we funded. So this is a little list of the charities that we've supported, all Australian charities doing work locally, nationally, and globally. So I have been in your position. I know how it feels to be writing grants. So between Christy and I and Lorna, we hope that we're going to be able to answer any questions that we can. So let's introduce the lovely Christy Rodwell, who you should see up on your screen. Christy, she's one of our, she's been with us since the get-go. She has a master's in philanthropy, and she's currently working with Lotterywest in the Healthway space. So I'm going to introduce you to Christy now, and she can tell you a little bit about our grants community. I'll kick over to you, Christy. Welcome.
Thanks, Karen, and thanks everyone for giving up some of your valuable time and joining us today. Look, I'm glad that you're really interested in 100 Women grants, and I'm really confident that we're going to be able to give you all the information you need to put an application in if you think the alignment is there for our 2025 grant round. But I'm also confident that I'm going to give you some tips and tricks that will be useful for any sort of funding application or sourcing philanthropic funding from other channels. I've worked in this space for coming up nearly 20 years. And I know that grant makers are often looking for very similar attributes. So let's get started. There's a few photos there on the screen of the grants committee. It's a 100% volunteer committee that's always made up of our members. We throw the opportunity out to our members to become involved, so they get really familiar with our grant making process and all the wonderful organisations that apply. And that's us over the years working through the application and assessment, and then even getting to award the grants at the end of the year.
Thanks, Christy. So let's go through the grants timeline. Obviously, we're right at the very beginning with the grant round opening tomorrow. Can you talk us through the grants kind of schedule, how it all works?
Sure. So we run a 2-stage process, and that's right. Our expression of interest application phase, stage 1, starts tomorrow and will run through until Wednesday, the 30th of April. So everyone's got about 5 weeks to do that initial expression of interest, which is online. First tip, make sure you work to the deadline. Manage your time, be able to jump in, have a look at the questions, which you can with our form, and make sure you work to the deadline. As a courtesy to everyone who does, we don't accept any late applications. So keep that in mind when you're doing your planning. So the grants committee will receive all of those expressions of interest. Once they come in, we'll review all of them and start our assessment process, which is looking to pull out the highest caliber applications, and they'll progress to our stage 2. And stage 2 is our more in-depth grant application, We purposefully work with a stage 1 and stage 2 process, so the burden for you as the applicant, as well as for our volunteer committee, is kept low. The expression of interest is really short and sharp, designed to get a high-level overview of what you're up to and what you plan to do with the funding. And then we dive deeper into those projects that are best aligned with our values and objectives in stage 2. So we work through our stage 2 applications, make recommendations at every phase along the way to our board, because the committee is a recommendation vehicle for 100 Women, and ultimately it's the trustee board that make all the decisions. But the board will then make the decisions on the finalists. And those finalists are presented to our Giving Circle members, and it's our Giving Circle members via collective voting that actually decide ultimately who will receive our funding. And our funding is announced annually at our gala. It's already set this year for the 18th of October. So that's when our grants will be awarded.
Beautiful. Thank you, Christy. And we'll go through this a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation. But I think let's start with eligibility, because of course that's going to be the big crux of whether you can get through that full application process or not. And there has been a few things that have changed since our 2024 guidelines and selection criteria was out. So Christy, let's have a chat about what the eligibility criteria is for 2025.
Sure. So the eligibility criteria is a must, and it is related to our legal structure and also the fact that 100% of our member donations go to the grants pool and our members receive a tax deductible receipt. So then that has implications under the Australian Taxation Office about who we can actually provide funding to. So to start off with, you must be a charity under the Australian Charities Act. You must have item 1 deductible gift recipient status, and everyone can check that really easily. The Australian Business Register website, which is free to access. If you look your organisation up there, it will actually have your charity listing and will also have your DGR status, including whether it's item 1 or item 2. And again, just enforcing that we can only give to item 1 DGR status organisations. Further, we're looking for organisations that have been operating at least 36 months. We're not looking for brand new organisations. You need to be up and running and have a little bit of a track record before we look to support you. And we're also looking at your total annual revenue, and we do that via the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission, and it's $3 million or less for 2025. And this is an area that the board has proactively changed for this current round. And what we're doing there is we're taking a proactive approach to purposefully support smaller grassroots charity organisations who don't necessarily have the capacity in terms of staff resources, time and capability within their organisations to be able to target either public fundraising or grants through government grants or government contracts or other broad philanthropic avenues for support. So that is a change for 100 Women in 2025. It will definitely be reviewed at the end of 2025, and we'll keep everyone up to date if there's further changes down the track.
Yeah, and there was one question, and I've had this come up before. If you are a registered business and then become a charity a little bit later, it's based on your ABN number, or when you basically first became a business. Is that correct, Christy?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So sometimes organisations will start operating and then change to be a charity. So yes, we're just looking for a track record of experience in terms of the activities and the programs that you're delivering. Yeah,
that's great. Hopefully that's answered your questions. Okay, so let's have a look next around auspicing. And this is something that is on our website. I've kind of popped that up on the screen for people to read. Do you want to talk us quickly through that?
Yeah, just a couple of other things, I guess, to note under the eligibility and also auspicing. So overseas registered charities are actually not eligible to apply. Anyone familiar with 100 Women will know that we do support projects offshore, but we are doing that via Australian registered charities. Any of our past recipients, those organisations that have been funded by 100 Women, they have to not be able to they're not able to reapply for a period of 3 years. And that 3-year period is from the date of when their funds were awarded. And they've also got to make sure that they've finished all their acquittal responsibilities. So we've just been clarifying that a little bit recently as well. And yes, auspicing. So this information is on the website. And if you think that it applies to you, I would recommend strongly that you have a detailed read of this. And if you've still got any questions, you can reach out to us via the grants email. But at a high level, what happens, and it is quite common in the not-for-profit space, is that a smaller organisation will work with a larger organisation who has DGR status to apply for a grant and basically use that larger organisation's DGR status to meet our requirements. 100 Women, though, does not support this arrangement, and we don't do auspicing. But as I said, if you think this applies to you and you'd like some further clarity, you're welcome to send us an email.
Beautiful. Thanks, Christy. So some of the things that 100 Women can't currently support, can you talk us through some of those key facts?
Sure. Look, again, I think these are really straightforward, and I would just highlight scholarships and probably the one-off events as the most common areas where I see applicants maybe not looking at this in detail enough and then sending us through an application that we can't accept. So again, providing scholarships, especially for vulnerable women and girls here in Australia as well as offshore, is quite a common occurrence with community service groups and not-for-profits. And it is a very valid way of supporting those vulnerable women and girls into education, no doubt about that, but it's not something that we choose to support. And the other element is the one-off events or conferences or something for a very short duration, maybe just some workshops or a retreat over 3 days. Again, this isn't a judgment on the validity of that type of work, but it's not work that 100 Women wishes to support. So just make sure you've checked out this, and any other time that an applicant gives you a list of what we can't support, make sure you've just covered off on that before you spend your valuable time putting in an application.
And there is, I think we've kind of, we've got this up on the website, and I don't know if you can see, but we do have some grant guidelines as well, which kind of does detail a little bit more about these guidelines and selection criteria that we're looking at. So let's have a look at the process now for 100 Women and actually making that application happen. So tomorrow, at some point in the morning, we will be going live on our current grant round page, which I'm assuming you've all been familiarised with now. So on that landing page will be a button that says start your application. We have actually built our own grant program, so you're not going to be using an external program like Smarty Grants or anything like that. This is our own application process, so it's on our website. Once you click that button, it will send you just down there a little grant application prompt for you to put your email address in. So that's going to be your contact, your user for getting back into the application later on down the track, knowing that you've got around 5 weeks to submit. And once you've got that welcome kind of email with the link, you can go into the application and you can press save and go back into that at any point that you want. So that's kind of what you're going to be seeing from tomorrow onwards, and that will be closing on Friday the 30th of April at 4 p.m. sharp Western Standard Time. So Christy, let's have a chat now. This is a little bit of a screenshot of the first page. Can you talk us through the actual application process?
Sure. So we're online here, as Karen has explained, and this is the first landing page. And this page is acting as a gatekeeper to those eligibility questions that we've just gone through. And there's also some smart here in terms of linking your ABN to the Australian Business Register. So it's actually going to check that for us. And it's also going to actually do the checks for us with respect to that deductible gift recipient status. So if those checks are failing and you do believe that you have a valid ABN and that DGR status, reach out to us and we'll double check what's going on there in the background. But there is some technology helping us with those checks. And then the other questions require a yes answer to proceed. Once you get past that first checks and balances page, you can see up the top that there's a further 7 pages to work through. And once you get there, you can work backwards and forwards. And you can actually, in your first session, sit down and preview all of the questions. You don't have to fill them in to be able to move across all of the pages. And it's also just going to point out to you in that top right-hand corner, you've got the save and close button. So again, you don't need to find 2 hours in your schedule to sit down and complete the whole application in one go. You've certainly got the opportunity to save and close, go in and out of the form as many times as you like. What you just need is the email address that you first requested the form with, and that's how you re-enter the form. So look, tips for filling in this form, as well as any grant application form, is that you really need to be specific, clear and specific, and answer the question that's been asked of you. We don't reach out at this expression of interest stage. Last year, for example, we received over 160 expressions of interest, and we're simply not resourced to be able to reach out to you and clarify anything if it's not clear in your answers. So, you need to be really clear, make sure you follow any of the directions, answer the specific questions that have been asked concisely in a way that makes sense for an audience that doesn't know anything about you. So another tip I offer is maybe get a family member or a friend who doesn't know very much about what you do or your organization, and get them to have a read. Do they understand what it is that you're proposing and the rationale that you've put forward? Because you've got to really make sure that we, the audience, the reader who knows nothing about your organization and your proposed project, understands in just reading that information. If we're left with more questions than answers, it is very hard to progress an application through to the next stage. And I guess the other thing I'd talk about while we're on with applications and some tips and tricks is that spelling mistakes or grammar or calculation mistakes in budgets, which I see quite commonly, just impede, again, you getting your story, your proposal across in a really confident and capable manner. So use a colleague at work or that family friend, and also make sure that you've done all those general checks and balances. And this circles back to my idea or note right at the beginning about time management and planning, so that you've got enough time to have written the application, you've conferred with colleagues that may need to provide you with input, you've had your own review, but then you've also workshopped it amongst some trusted advisors to help you put your best foot forward.
Excellent. And let's have a quick chat around the critical need as well. So you've been you've covered off some wonderful tips for our applicants here, and you will be providing a video on this probably next week across our socials. But let's have a chat about the critical need. If an organisation has a couple of projects that they're running that benefit women and girls, how do they know which one's going to be the best one to put forward?
Sure. Yes. No, this question comes up often. And it is really about that critical need. Which project is going to have the biggest outcome or impact for your beneficiaries in the community that you are working with? What project will really change lives and change trajectories if you were to be successful with funding? That's the project that 100 Women and any other funders want to hear about. And in your application, you've got to strongly articulate and make the connection between that critical need and your strategies or activities to address that critical need, but then really clearly the outcomes, the changes that are going to happen for the beneficiary group. And the project that has that articulated and connected the strongest is certainly the best one to put forward to any grant maker. And for us, when we're looking at a significant number of proposals who they're all genuine in their need and in the community groups that will benefit. The ones that rise to the top are ones where that critical need is clearly articulately expressed without question, and we all get it. You know, you have that aha moment really quickly and really easily. And that's not to say that the idea might not be complex, but that you've been able to articulate it in a way that's easily understood by the audience.
Yeah, and we've got another slide on this quickly on how you can perhaps use a methodology around that. But just quickly, cash contributions. This is one that I remember back in the day when I was working with Zonta. There's a little bit of a question mark around that. I mean, is our cash contribution like $10, or is it $1,000, or is it $50,000? What is that kind of line where we need to provide a bit from the organisation side in order to be able to be approved?
Sure. And look, there's no magical answer to this, I'm afraid. It's not as easy as that, but it is important for everyone to recognise that 100 Women won't be a sole funder or provide 100% funding of a project. There must be a cash contribution, and we don't mind whether that comes from you as the applicant or another funder, another community organisation that's working in the same project, for example. And look, we look at what's reasonable. So dependent on your organisation, the size of your organisation, and then the context for the project, who else is involved in the project, what's the need, what's the activities that are occurring, we will then make a determination of what's a reasonable contribution. And look, it's part of the reason that we do look at financial statements. There's other reasons we do look for those, but it is part of the reason we ask for that documentation, so we can understand the financial status of the organisation. And look, as we have reduced the total revenue request, or I guess limit, from a higher amount down to $3 million. We recognise now that we are working with smaller grassroots organisations, and their ability to contribute will also be smaller relative to some of the organisations we've supported in the past. But I think it's like most things, you need to have some skin in the game. That's how we think about it. If you've got some skin in the game, the success of your project is more highly guaranteed.
Yeah, and particularly for that sustainability piece, our grants can provide a 12 to 24 months long project, but we're wanting to look at those organisations that are working with other partners or have a revenue generating kind of process within their business that will help to sustain that project. And I think it's been a really important one for us, because now, as I mentioned earlier, 90% of the projects that we funded are still running today. So it is a really important thing that you're looking at the sustainability of the model that you're presenting to us as well. So just quickly on the theory of change model and the guidelines, you're kind of referencing this. So can you just quickly talk this through, how that might help applicants as well?
I will, but I might just get you, Karen, if you don't mind. I missed another important element that we do get asked about regularly, just with the application and our guidelines, and that's about the outcome primarily benefiting women and girls. So again, in terms of the areas that a lot of not-for-profit community service groups are working on, They may be working, say, for example, in delivering respectful relationships and informed consent training or workshops to teenagers and, say, males in high school settings or juniors in a football club. And no doubt that that is really important education and training and information that will go a long way for improving views about women and men and equality, reducing our rates of sexual assault, and also in terms of preventing family and domestic violence cases as well. No doubt about that. But 100 Women doesn't play in that space. So the primary benefits of our funding must be the women and girls themselves. So even taking a very similar situation, we have provided in the past and continue to do those types of respectful relationships, informed consent, family planning for vulnerable cohorts, be they recently arrived migrants and refugees, people who are unaware of the sort of the Australian health system and what community service organisations are available. For core groups too, where English might be a second or a third language, providing some of that information in easily accessible language. But there, the primary group is the women and girls, and that's where our place is. So just keep that in mind in terms of there may be projects that we've supported where there might be a small number of the participants being boys or young men, and that's okay. But the primary benefit must be women and girls. And I can circle back to that if there's any questions, because I suspect there might be.
And I think what I love as well about this process is and the grant recipients that we have is that it also doesn't matter the number of beneficiaries that you're looking at. It's the quality over quantity. So I just wanted to reinforce that message as well. So we'll go back to the theory of change model, if you can just quickly kind of give an idea of how that can help someone when they're writing a grant for 100 women.
Yeah, look, I think this is really important for 100 Women or anyone when you're seeking funding from sort of any source outside of public fundraising, to actually understand what your theory of change or your program logic is. And it's where you've identified clearly what your problem is, what the critical need is, or maybe also too sometimes where you're going to take advantage of an opportunity. And then you've understood what activities that you're actually going to undertake. And part of that too, that's where you're kind of looking at what resources do I need, what funding or what people or what materials or what venues, what do I actually need to be able to undertake those activities. And then by undertaking those activities, I'll have outputs. So that might be that people have attended training. But from the outputs, at intervals after that, you'll have outcomes. So short, medium, and long-term outcomes. And then eventually you're seeing the desired impact or changes for the beneficiary group. And there's actually a Western Australian developed resource. I've listed it there, the Community Impact Hub, that has a wealth of information, really easily accessible, bite-sized information, tutorials, online tools that delve into this in a lot of detail, but as I said, in a really simple, digestible chunks. So I recommend in your spare time, when you're looking at your next grant application, that you do some work on this. And the other thing too is once you've done it once, it's sort of there as a tool and a resource, even to help your organisation in terms of alignment, making sure that everyone in terms of your program staff, is everyone really clear about what it is that you're working towards? And then it certainly helps with looking at all of your funding requests or even managing budgets.
Excellent. Thank you, Christy. That's going to be really helpful, I think for a lot of people on the call. So I think now we've kind of got all of the crux of what we need to do to submit our application. We're getting to that point where we've now submitted our application. Fortunately, we have now set it up so that you'll have, hopefully from next week, a PDF that is shot through to your email of your application as well. So, Christy, what happens after that?
So the grants committee team gets to work and they're reviewing every single expression of interest that comes through. It's being assessed independently twice. So there's a real rigor to our process and very high quality assurance of that assessment of all of those expressions of interest. And then what happens is we make recommendations on which ones will progress to stage 2. As I said, there's no point taking a huge number of people through to stage 2 to have to fill in a full application form when ultimately at the end of the year, we are looking to award sort of 4 to 5 grants. So it's about managing the burden and the expectation for applicants as well as our volunteer committee. So the grants committee come together, they've done independent work, they've come together as a committee, spent half a day in a face-to-face workshop. The recommendations are made to the trustee board. Once the trustee board confirms those recommendations, the organisations invited to progress to stage 2 will be contacted via email. Our second stage application form isn't online, so you will receive that as a attachment on email. We're aiming for about mid-June, 20-ish of June for those emails to go out. And then those organisations will have about 4 weeks through until July, mid to late July, to complete those second stage applications and have those returned to us. Every single person that submitted a expression of interest will get an email by the end of June advising of the outcome of their submission. So those applications, so when we get those in-depth full grant applications in mid-July, again, the grants committee go off and do due diligence on those applications. At this point, we may be dealing with 20 to 25 applications, roughly. And this is where we have the opportunity to contact you. We'll either maybe get to set up a meeting if you're here in Perth, but more than likely the team will reach out and we'll have a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting, get to speak to you in depth about your proposal and clarify details and make sure we've got great alignment between what you want to do and 100 Women values. We also at this point contact independent referees and really make sure that we understand the proposal and all of the objectives and strategies. We then come back together as a group and make the recommendations for the finalists. So at this point, we may have, for any number of reasons, lost a couple of second stage applicants along the way. So we might be dealing with up to 20 at this point, but then we're trying to reduce that pool down to 7 to 9 is normally the range of finalists that we'll take through to present to our members for voting.
And that is very hard, isn't it?
That second stage workshop is very tricky because at that point, we really understand the organisation and the project, and they're all incredibly worthy. But unfortunately, it's always dependent on the grants pool. So look, our members and our supporters continue to do a great job raising between sort of 200,000, 250,000 on an annual basis into that grants pool, and we're limited. We could make 9 grants if we had more money, but generally speaking, we're making 4 to 5 grants on an annual basis.
Yeah. So the message here is another thing that you can do to support 100 Women and obviously to help us to build our grants pool is to share what 100 Women does, because a lot of our members, in fact, some of our grant recipients are members as well. It's once you kind of learn about the fact that all of this, 100% of the funding goes straight into that grants pool, that we can only grow this grants pool with more members, then it becomes something that you could be sharing out to your community as well and helping us to grow that and to provide more grants out. So you can play a part in this as well. So let's have a chat about the mix, because 100 Women are quite a unique giving circle in that we provide a promise to our members that we are looking to canvass projects that are international, national, in that they might be a charity based somewhere in Australia, but they're providing that project around Australia in different states, and then also locally as well. So can you talk us through that mix?
Sure. So at every step, we're making sure there is a diversity and a mix of projects based on the cause or our focus areas, which are health, education, safety, and economic opportunity, and that we've also got projects represented across WA, Australia, and overseas. And as we take the projects forward, we're just conscious of that mix. We never really have to, I guess, purposefully or proactively manage that, but it is certainly part of the conversation and something that's kept in mind when we are making our recommendations for stage 2 as well as the finalists. So for example, it might only be that we have 2 projects, say based on the East Coast, and they've got a very similar focus area or even a very similar beneficiary group. We might then have to get into the nitty-gritty of those 2 projects, because it wouldn't necessarily be to the benefit of 100 Women members to present them with 2 such similar projects when they're voting. So for example, if you think about, you know, we're going to present them with 7 or 8 and we've only got 4, you know, we've got enough for 4 grants. We want to make sure that there's a breadth to that funding. And look, we do talk to our members and survey our members on a regular basis, and they choose to be members of 100 Women because they are attracted to that diversity in funding mix, which is very unique for a giving circle. Any of you who are familiar with the premise of giving circles is that, generally speaking, they are very much a local geographic based funding group that will set a sort of a geographic ring around their funding, which is very local to where they're set up.
And I think the other benefit there is when you think about our members, we have members that are international as well. We've got a member in Singapore, member in Dubai, member in India, and they're all wanting to see that there is an option with a giving circle or a philanthropic foundation to be able to provide the funding where you believe, as an individual, the need is most critical. So I think it's a lovely thing that our members can either choose to vote locally, choose to vote nationally, or internationally, or a breadth of both. So let's have a chat now about how that works. How do the members vote?
Sure. So we have a great online voting tool. So our members come to our own 100 Women website and they have the opportunity to read in-depth briefings, very neutral briefings about each of the projects that have been crafted by the volunteers in the grants committee. And they get to vote. And also too, what happens here is they don't actually have to only pick 1 or 3. They get to prioritize or order all finalists in preferential order of how they wish the funding to be provided. And then what happens is the collective tally of the members determines which organisations will receive funding. It is very much an integral part of how the giving circle works. So the committee or the board doesn't come over the top of that voting stands, and we basically work through that preferential list, sort of working through how much money is in the grants pool and what those organisations have requested. Because while we set an upper limit each grant round, and in 2025 it's $50,000, there may be organisations that will come in and say ask for a project at less than that. So that happens virtually every year. We'll get a number of projects that might need something like 39,000 or 42,000, and that smaller request in the finalist mix might then help us award an additional grant that might not have been the case if all of the top ranked projects were asking $50,000.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so at the end of it all, when we have our finalists noted down, we know at 100 Women who will be receiving those grants, but our members don't until our wonderful annual gala dinner, which this year is on the 18th of October. So Christy, you usually will provide that feedback, whether you've received the grant or not, in due course of that, because we'll usually try and have those recipients at the gala as well. So I just wanted to kind of like close out the interview with Christy now and kind of introduce Lorna Boys into the mix as well. I'll just quickly kind of share with you our QR code. As I said, you can become a member of 100 Women and contribute to this grants pool, so we would love to have you join. But I'm going to hand you over now to Lorna and to Christy. We're here to field any calls. I'm going to take the screen now off so that we're back into a gallery format, but I might kick off the questions just by asking how quickly the funding does come through after that gala dinner.
Sure. So on the 18th of October this year, the funding announcements will be made and the successful organisations will be paid by the first week in November.
Fabulous. So hello, Lorna, you're there. Can you hear me?
Oh, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes. So Lorna is our grants manager. So if you do receive a grant from 100 Women, this is the lovely woman that will be working through with you post receiving the funding right through the whole project period and through to the acquittal. So thank you, Lorna, for all the work that you do as a volunteer. So have you seen, it looks like we've been answering quite a lot of the questions that have been coming through. Is there any kind of trend or anything that's been coming out of that?
Not really. We had a couple of questions, which I think I've either managed to answer in the chat or you and Christy have answered as you've gone along. But if anyone wanted to have any more detail around those or wanted to ask any other questions, this would be your chance. So feel free.
Beautiful. Yeah, pop your hand up. So there's Jacinta. We're just going to ask you to unmute.
Yes, so I asked the question before about the track record kind of ABN thing. So I know that if we put our current ABN in, it's not going to like get past that page. So what do we need to do to like potentially still be like eligible and keep going through and get that as a yes, so that we can go, like, can we still submit it even if it's a no on that page, or does it do you know what I mean?
Sure, Jacinta. So what the ABN Smarts is actually about the valid ABN. It's not actually checking the date.
Okay.
That's a manual check that we will do. And I just encourage you to reach out and explain the situation so you can definitely get a green light or not before you spend your valuable time filling in the full form.
Yeah.
So can you email us, please, at the grants inbox, and we'll get back to you fairly promptly with an answer on that. As I said, you know what, in life, we are all short of time, right? Let's get clarity on this and make sure that the investment in your time to fill in the entire form isn't going to be wasted.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
So Karen, I've just seen a follow-up to one of the questions that was asked about the grant funding amount and co-contributions, just wanting some clarity as to whether the $50,000 for the project is inclusive of match funding. And I've just clarified that 100 Women will grant up to $50,000 towards a project, but we won't be the sole funder of the project, and that we need to see some cash contribution and in-kind contribution, of course, from the applicant as well as other organisations. And that's just to demonstrate that there is widespread sort of support for the project.
Yeah.
As a follow-up to that, I can see a comment here from Nigel, who said, so a total grant might be $70,000 with 20,000 co-contribution and up to $50,000 from 100 women as an example. Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
And I
we did a sorry, Christy, we did some analysis into our grant recipients previously, and you know, we had a look at the contribution of 100 women's donations in comparison to the total project cost, and about 50% of them had a majority from 100 women, and the other 50% had another contribution that was more than 50%. So if that gives you an idea that the breadth of the different kinds of cash contributions that we expect.
Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify there for everyone, you don't need to have a contribution from both yourself and someone else. There just needs to be a cash contribution from another party. So either yourself or another funding body.
Excellent. Do we have any other questions? Of course, we are available on the grants email address. We will be giving everyone a recording of this webinar for you to go back to if you require. And as I mentioned earlier on, Christy has done a series of tips that we'll be putting forward onto socials in due course. You do have 5 weeks to apply. So if you do come up with any queries that are quite critical to you applying, please reach out. And if you have any bugs or any problems with the actual application process, please reach out as soon as you can as well. If anyone doesn't have any more questions, then what kind of a webinar is this when you get to finish 9 minutes early? This is great. So thank you very much to Christy and to Lorna and to the team at 100 Women for putting this together today. It's lovely to see some faces there. So thanks for popping on your video so that I do get to see that you're real, you're out there, you're doing amazing work, and we can't wait to receive your applications. This is just such a fill the love cup up experience for 100 Women to see the incredible work that you're doing with our most vulnerable communities. So keep doing the incredible work you're doing. We are championing you no matter what. We do wish you the very best of luck. And if there's nothing else, then I'll say goodbye and thank you very much for joining us today. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the other side.